But think about you and your car, or you and a truck. You pay $1,500, $2,000, $3,000. You know where $6 million? Think about that. How much wrecker you could have buy for $6 million? How much fire truck you could have buy for? It's better that they leave that fire truck, drain out the oil. You understand? Drain out the oil and make that into a reef or something. It went down somewhere to go. $6 million, we could have buy 3 more fire truck and 2 wrecker. But you know what hurt me with that? You go to PTSC and you see big wreckers park up, owned by the state. You go to the army and they have equipment. You go right by the Ministry of Works and you see equipment. You tell me that we couldn't save $6 million to the taxpayers, but we had money and it wasn't theirs, it was yours. And they knew how to spend it. They knew how to spend your money. Let me tell you how this government spent your money. And this is why you have to make the right choice. This government came in 2015. We had some challenges because the energy prices went into a quick fall. We didn't just decide that we're going to throw our hands up in the air because we promise you, as a country, we're going to continue the infrastructure development of this country. And we had to find ways to do it. And I remember the day I saw in as Minister of Works, I said one thing. When the media asked me, all these projects in the manifesto, how are you going to get it done? And I said, just came out of my mouth, I will do more with less. Because I knew we had less. And we had to produce a lot more if we had to take this country forward. Let's talk about that same Solomon Holtroy Highway that they brought in one contractor to complete. The Prime Minister, on the directions of the Prime Minister, we decided to break the contract up into packages where our local contractors was able to participate. So we went out for tender, competitive tendering, local contractors, foreign contractors. 12 packages, all were won by local contractors because they had the opportunity now to participate. Because when you put a contract out there for $5 billion, there's no local contractor who could qualify for that. Because one of the qualifications that you have is, have you ever built a highway at this? Can you raise a bond? How much contractors build a $5 billion highway in Trinidad? So automatically you throw them out. When you break it up into segments, they can, 1, raise the bond, and 2, they can show you how much work they did like that. You know, all the packages was won by locals. The foreigners couldn't compete with them. And that highway is under full construction now. And your money is well accounted for. When last you hear about a protest, a strike, a bacchanal along on the South Highway, some people say, but all they didn't continue the highway. They can't believe that that highway is continuing all the way down. We spoke about another highway in Kumoto to Manzalena. From Kumoto to Manzalena, yes. Ends in San Grande, a first-class road. But that South Highway, same terrain, same type of highway, same international standard, they were billing it at $120 million per kilometer. Same highway going to Kumoto, we are billing it at $80 million per kilometer. So if you calculate a saving of $40 million per kilometer, and you consider some of these highways are over 40 kilometers, and that one project, we are saving you $2 billion. And that is why we can boast of, at this time, building 4 highways with decline in revenue. We are building a highway, we continue the highway from San Fernando to Port of Spain. Valencia to Toco, full speed ahead. 8 contractors going up there. Packages broke up, local contractors. Wallafield to Manzalena. And the entire Maruga Road upgrade, the first-class road, all at the same time. And trust me, the savings on one of those highways will give us the Maruga Road, the Valencia Road, and a continuation all the way to Toco. That is what we talk, when we say doing more with less, that is what we mean. No minister getting involved in the procurement, value for money, competitive tendering. Let's talk a little bit of the land acquisition. And Prime Minister, I don't know if I could get a little time just to All right, thanks, because I know my time is up and I have so much to bring to your attention because it's important that we make the right choice. The land acquisition for the San Fernando Highway was budgeted at $400 million. I don't know which part in the world a government could change and the value of land could move from $400 million to $800 million. As we speak, they have paid for about 50% of the land, and we have spent in excess of $650 million. Could you imagine where that land acquisition will end up? Every day I have people calling me for payments. We can't pay, because right now as we speak, there's a commission of inquiry for somebody to explain to this country what went on with the land acquisition on that highway. Now you compare that to the Curep interchange. We met a budget there for land acquisition between close to 150, previous government. This cabinet, recognizing that you can't pay somebody for land more than the value of the land. We use compulsory acquisition. Cabinet, based on the estimates, the market value reduced the budget to $95 million. And they said, compulsory acquisition. The owner brings a valuation, the commissioner of valuation does his valuation, you establish what is a real market value, and you pay the people for that. We have paid close to 90% of the people who have properties there. Reduce the budget from 150 to 95. And as we speak, after paying almost 90% of the landowners, we are just about 60% of the budget that we budgeted. Now, that is the way you have to manage people's business. So your choice, basically, is you choose the excessives of 2010 to 2015 or the prudent management of 2015 to 2020. And then you decide, with something like COVID, do you want somebody who say sunlight kills COVID? Open the borders? Open the bars, bathe with Lysol, or drink what it is. Drink something, Clorox, whatever it is, you choose. I can go on and tell you at the Ministry of Works and Transport, we would have done in excess of 22 coastal projects. But we're not just about highways. Ministry of Works deals with infrastructure. And the procurement that we use, I can tell you, we have adopted and implemented almost all of the recommendations that was put forward in terms of first-in-class procurement. And that is why we can achieve so much. We have completed close to 22 coastal projects. We have upgraded over 700 roads. So it's not just about highways. Over 700 roads. We have modernized the licensing office, something that they wanted an extra $600 million to do. We have done that from the $20 million that they left back. We have opened the Caroni office, because that was closed. It was more or less a shell. We have built a new office in Sani Grande. We have upgraded the Arima office. We have upgraded Port of Spain. So from that $20 million, we were able to achieve what they wanted, almost $600 million to do. And most important, we have used technology. We have brought the license office into the digital era. We have also moved the sea bridge. And you know, it's a pity that on a meeting like this you can't go into, because I would love to carry a conversation on the sea bridge. Because they have accused us of everything under the sun on the sea bridge. But what they will not tell you is that they left a sea bridge that was in shambles. And as we speak, there's a matter in the court which I can't refer too much to. It's a pity that due to the COVID, that matter couldn't start and continue. Then this country will see exactly what is corruption, what was happening at the port. We were able to solve that problem and take some of the players, put them in front of the court and let the court decide. But what we did is that we moved the sea bridge from where it was, it's 1,600 passengers one way, to, as we speak, 2,100 passengers one way. And by January next year, 3,200 passengers. Never before have we had 3 vessels, 3 passenger vessels, and a program that if one vessel goes into for maintenance, you have 2 vessels operating. Tobago have always clamored for a cargo vessel that can do the trip in 4 hours and take a fair amount of passengers, the truck drivers. December of this year, a new cargo vessel will be coming, doing the trip in under 4 hours and taking 400 passengers to Tobago. Exactly what the truckers and the businessmen of Tobago wanted. We have engaged that new vessel for them. So we have solved the problem on the sea bridge. We have created, through the Drainage Division, a program where over 1,200 projects would have been completed. But more important, you would have seen yesterday as major flooding in La Hoqueta and Greenvale. And some people started to panic. What you saw yesterday was some flash flooding. Flash flooding. Immediately on getting the call that some people started to panic, I reached out to WASA. I got the drainage department on the ground, and we started to monitor the rivers and the detention ponds. They were not even 50% at the capacity. Not even 50%. Why? Because after the catastrophe in Greenvale, we immediately went out and we widened the Caroni River. We started a project in the Caroni River, made sure the pumps, everything was working. And what we have done at the Ministry of Works and Transport, we have created a program working with the Andean Development Bank to bring flood relief to this country once and for all. We took all the plans that we spent millions and millions on, took all these plans, got the Andean Development Bank to hire a consultant at their cost, not at our cost. And they have created an operational plan for us. Short term, medium term, and long term. We have started all the short term, upgrading our pump houses, bringing in new pumps. Where the rivers, we can widen the rivers, like the Caroni River, we started that. So we took all the low-hanging fruits and we started on that. And that is why Port of Spain, you'll see new pumps in Port of Spain. This year we have 8 new pumps coming in. And we intend to replace all the pumps in Trinidad over the next 2 years. And the Andean Development Bank, through the consultant from Holland, will tell us exactly where the detention ponds have to go, and a program funded by the Andean Development Bank. So it's not just about doing studies and studies and studies. We have a plan. We have started the plan, and we intend to tackle this problem of flooding because we do have a change in the weather pattern. And we have to be prepared for that. I want to close because we have other speakers, but I want to give you a little, something happened to me this morning. For the last 3 or 4 days, I was bombarded with a call from a certain businessman in Trinidad. And I keep putting him off, because as campaign manager, I get about 5,000 calls on how to win the next election. But you have to listen to all, and you have to, and the guy insisted he wanted to see me. So I said this morning, come and see me. And when he came, I knew the guy. And he said to me, I came to make a donation. I said, donation, I know you're a businessman, but you don't do anything with the government. You don't do contracts. You don't supply the government with anything. So, you know why? He said that he does business in India. He does business in South Africa. He does business in the States. He has 3 malls in the States. And he does business in Trinidad. He said in India, his business is almost closed down because real estate prices in India have dropped almost 50% because of COVID. He said in South Africa, he can't even survive, but he tried to keep the business going because of COVID. He said in the US, 2 of his malls might go for sale. He said the only place that his business is surviving is in Trinidad. He said he's not making the money that he accustomed making, but he's paying his staff and he's paying his bills. And he's safe. And he wanted to ensure that whatever this government is doing, we continue to do it. So he wanted to make a donation to the party because he felt that he knew what the right choice was. He's not a PNM. He's not any other party, from what I understand. But he recognized that if this country ever needed a responsible government, it is now. And if a person like him could see that, there's no reason why the entire country should not understand that this country needs Dr. Keith Rowley. This country needs Terence Dial Singh. This country needs Dr. Parashram. This country needs a responsible government and a responsible party. And that party is the People's National Movement. I have no doubt that the People's National Movement will win the next election. And we will all say, great is the PNM. I thank you.
For the love of we country, we go vote to protect the treasury. Vote is only Dr. Rowley, the right choice for
Trinidad and Tobago, the evidence is before you. Why never again, Kamala? Shogunas East, show me a leader. Shogunas East, it's your time. Born in the agricultural community of Rio Claro, as a young lawyer, our next speaker gravitated towards areas in law which touched and concerned land tenure and land administration, as it was always his desire to help the agricultural sector of our country. And even when his legal practice expanded beyond our shores, his keen interest in serving our country remained dear to his heart, resulting in his ministerial appointment as the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries. In his capacity as Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, his successes and achievements are countless. This year, he went a step further and offered himself as the right man, the right choice for the electoral district of Shogunas East. Shogunas East, let me hear you. PNM people, let me hear you. I welcome to the platform your candidate, Senator, the Honorable Clarence Rambarat.
Shogunas East, yes, we moving. With Clarence now it's time to win. Clarence is the people's champion. Clarence the right choice at the right time. Shogunas East, yes, we moving. With Clarence and the PNM. Election they do the right thing. Vote Clarence and the PNM. Hey.
Shogunas East. What time is it? Time to win. Thank you very much. Political leader, fellow candidate, our Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Christopher Rowley. Dr. Rowley, thank you very much. When the constituency executive of Shogunas East approached me to sign my consent form, thank you very much for approving it so quickly. I'm happy here. I'm fitter than ever, stronger than ever, and I'm about to do our party proud. But I couldn't do it alone. What we've done so far in Shogunas East, I could not do it alone. I want to thank Irvin Isles, Chairman, and the constituency executive. I want to thank those who have served before me, including former MP Mustafa Abdul Hamid. I want to thank the long-standing stalwart Ronald Hira. I want to thank all our previous councillors. And most importantly, I want to thank the lovely people of Chaguanas East. You've made this place nice, nice, nice to me. And I promise I'll make it better. And with you, I'll make it the best constituency ever. My cabinet colleagues, Paula Gopi-Skoon, my campaign manager, you can't ask for more. Rohan Sinanan, Minister of Works and Transport, Deputy Political Leader of the party. Dennis Moses, my friend, a man to whom I've turned many times for comfort in this difficult job. Members of the party's executive, without whom we would not have a PNM. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow candidates, I've listened to them talk about doing nothing for agriculture. Well, I'll tell you one thing that the PNM would not do for agriculture. We would not bring back the sugar industry. And anybody who suggests that we could return to the days of growing cane, burning cane, and grinding cane to make sugar is out of touch. But I'll tell you something I learned a long time ago. When you have precious airtime, don't talk about your opponents, talk about yourself. And I have a lot to tell you. I have a lot to tell you about agriculture. And we are fortunate in this country to have, as Prime Minister, a former Minister of Agriculture, a registered farmer, a former fisheries officer, and a man who's passionate about food, animals, and people eating right. You see him? You see him? So I want to tell you this. They get very angry when I talk about land tenure, you know. Dr. Botiwari even went so far as to say Rambert always talking about land. Well, yes, you ever try to grow food on water? Land is at the heart of life. And long before I became Minister of Agriculture, the PNM doesn't just get policy by VAPs, you know. When our political leader in 2013 asked me to start working on the PNM's policy for agriculture, I started home, up in Plumita, where my family has farmed for decades and farmed up to now. And at the heart of the problems was this issue of land tenure. It has plagued farming. It has plagued residential occupants of state land. That is the thing we call squatting. It has plagued institutions. Prime Minister was down in Moruga last year, March, for spiritual Shouter Baptist Liberation Day ceremonies. And he made a commitment to all the religious organizations in the country that by the end of 2019, we would have made substantial progress on the land issues plaguing the church, the masjids, the temples. So if the people closest to God are suffering in this country on this issue of land tenure, could you imagine all the rest of us? So that is what the farmers told me. That is what we put in the 2015 manifesto. And that is what we've spent the last 5 years doing. But you know why they don't want me to talk about land tenure? Because the first thing I had to do was to clean up the mess they made with the VSEP land for the former Caroni workers. And sometimes they forget to tell you. You see, we do a lot of things in the PNM because it comes naturally to us. And they forgot to tell you that I myself, I VSEP myself from Caroni, you know. And in signing on to the VSEP, I was entitled to a 2-acre parcel of land. And within 1 week of my appointment, a file landed on my desk with my draft Caroni lease. And I said to the country, I will not take my Caroni lease until I've given the agricultural leases to every single Caroni worker. And there were 7,246 who met the original deadline. And I'm only dealing with the original because other people added. But we have been dealing with 7246. So I am number 7246. And in the last 5 years, we've cleaned up the mess in relation to more than 7,000 title documents for those WESEP workers. In agriculture, 2 acres, and in the residential parcels. So much so, on the agricultural side, we could not locate about 1,300 former Caroni workers to give them their leases. And we advertised, and we got several hundreds coming forward. And today, if there was any Caroni worker who fall within the 7246 who had not received their deed on the agricultural side, they could come to me, they could go to Caroni, or they could go to their MP to make arrangements to collect the lease. Because the 2 acre is important, you know. The 2 acre is important because the 2 acre policy was driven by the European Union's support for Trinidad and Tobago to transition out of sugarcane and sugar. So if the EU understands why not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the other Commonwealth sugar producers who once benefited from preferential pricing for sugar, if the EU understands why we have to get out of sugar, why doesn't Kamala Bissessa find that difficult to understand? Why does she find that difficult to understand? And it is the PNM who took the Caroni workers out of that situation. And at the heart of it was the 2 acre parcels of land and the residential land. So land tenure has been number one, and it has not been only the Caroni workers. We've had farmers in Calcifield, Wallerfield, right up to Allendale and Toko, Brooklyn Settlement in Sangre Grande, Marac, Rio Claro, Guayaguayari Road, Rio Claro food crop, Guayaguayari Mayaro food crop, Kush, Tick Village in Siparia, up in northeast Trinidad, Rincon, come right back through Paramin, the home of my colleague, Minister Colum Imbert. And throughout central Trinidad, we've had people struggling, farmers struggling with this issue of land tenure. And when people ask me why agriculture has fallen so much in this country, I say to them, one, it is because our agriculture was constructed on the need to send certain primary produce to the mother country. We grew to ship, and we imported to feed ourselves. As we moved into industrialization, and in particular, the energy sector, the labor moved off the fields and the farms, and the capital moved off the fields and the farms. But even before that, cocoa on the East Coast started to suffer when Trinidad and Tobago moved first to have the base constructed in Chaguaramas. In fact, this part of the country saw the rise of a lot of truck owners and contractors who got the job to transport material from East Trinidad, including the quarry in Aripo, down to the base for the construction of those facilities. And when those workers moved to work in the quarries and moved onto the base to work, agriculture on the East Coast declined. But the third reason I'll offer you is this. All those farming families grew up seeing the frustration of parents and then grandparents moving from government office to government office, seeking renewal of a lease. And by the time the second generation came along, they could not see a future because their parents could not see a future. Because an investment in agriculture is not just an investment in cash. It's an investment of passion and energy, of sweat and commitment. And if the state had not been honoring its simple commitment to grant the renewal of the tenure that would support the financial and emotional investment being made, then second and third generations had no interest in agriculture. And I could tell you something. I could tell you, because we have not been renewing these leases in secret, you know. Every time the cabinet approves a lease, a renewal, I write a letter personally as minister to the recipient. I write them the letter personally. And I hand it to them personally. And the photographs are on social media. One is for transparency. But the second thing is to let the country and those who are long suffering know that you don't have to pay nobody or bribe nobody or know anybody. You just have to bring your documents forward. Because at the heart of what we set out to do in renewing this country's fortunes in agriculture was dealing with the issue of land tenure. And that is why our opponents don't want to hear about that. Because to hear about that is to face their own failure to deal with that issue which was at the heart. In particular, the former Caroni workers who they consider to be their heartland supporters. And by renewing the leases, you move into the second thing that we do. You revive a whole family. And when people say to me that young people are not interested in agriculture, I tell them no. I tell them the second largest dashing bush producer in the country is in Wallerfield. It's a 26-year-old woman. And I say to them, go. You see, it is not only in the election campaign they're afraid to walk among the people, you know. To talk about agriculture, none of them going on a farm, you know. None of these people writing this policy going on a farm, you know. But I'll tell you this. In my first year as Minister of Agriculture, first year, I had already gone to 150 farms in this country. Because when I was sworn in, I told the country, one of the things I commit to do is to avoid foreign travel. Because I felt that there was enough to see in Trinidad and Tobago on the farms of the farmers. And as minister, after 5 years, I only managed 5 trips. But the vehicles I use, and there are 2, managed 360,000 kilometers on the road. Because when we work on the fields and the farms of the persons we serve. And production is going to be stimulated by a number of things, but it is stimulated by land tenure first and foremost. And I'll tell you this about production. As we started the COVID period, I was approached by the media and was asked about a post-COVID plan for Trinidad and Tobago. And I said to them, we haven't even gotten into COVID yet. And what we are trying to do, what the Prime Minister is trying to achieve through the cabinet committees that he established, is trying to establish, amongst other things, food stability. And we had to focus on keeping the food flowing into and around Trinidad and Tobago. And there were those who were talking about starvation and skyrocketing of food prices. And when they weren't talking about shortage, they were talking about glut. And I say to you, even as Grenada had a 5-kilometer line to a supermarket, and Barbados allowed you to shop based on the first letter of your surname. And Canada had empty shelves for miles and miles of supermarkets. There was no food shortage in this country. And that is because of one single policy decision the Prime Minister advocated. He advocated that markets must not close. It's that simple. Markets must not close. And once NAMDEVCO and the municipal corporations kept the markets open, adhering to everything set out by the Chief Medical Officer and the Minister of National Security and the Minister of Health, once the markets remained open, the food flowed. And once the port remained open, the food flowed. And once we were in contact with the importers of seed and chemicals and so on, through the hard work of the Honorable Minister of Trade and Industry, we were able to keep this country fed. And not for 1 minute we engaged our opponents on this issue of food shortage and starvation and prices skyrocketing. We were focused then, as we are now, on doing our jobs. Which brings me to the third part of agriculture. When we came in, I said to the country, we've long suffered as many primary agricultural producers. India is the most obvious example of a proliferation of middlemen in agriculture. And I know, because I was born and I grew up in this thing. And I was not only born in agriculture, I was born on the East Coast. And I grew up seeing the fishermen. This fishing thing not easy, you know. It's not easy, you know. It's while you sleeping in the dark, the fishermen go out, you know. This fishing is not easy. But all their toil is given away as the fish land on the shore because of the proliferation of middlemen. And the farmers in my hometown in Navet, for example, when you go, because if you go, you will see, you know. If you go, you will see. If you go on a Sunday, if you go on a Wednesday in Navet, you see all the bags, all the crocus bags lining the roads where the dasheen and dasheen bush is cultivated. That is for the middleman to pick up. That is for the middleman to pick up. So the third area was farm to table and narrowing the distance and creating an opportunity for farmers to sell directly to the consumers. But it is not just the distance, you know, and it's not just the middlemen, you know. It is tied to the fourth element of agriculture. Because I also said as minister that agriculture and health live together. Because food is not just because you're hungry, you know. Food is because it fuels your body. And the fresher the food, and the more appropriate the food for consumption, the less we'll be spending on health. So the case for agriculture and farming is not just a case for food. It is a case for the ever-rising cost of keeping the unhealthy in this country alive. And by the farmers being able to sell in the NAMDEVCO farmers market, we are putting fresher, cheaper, healthier produce in the hands of the average consumer of this country. It was not rocket science, you know. We didn't do anything fancy. It started with a decision to put a farmers market in the Queen's Park Savannah. And it moved to a decision, because I always say as Minister of Agriculture, I want to pull the blinds in the office and see farmers and farms. And that is why the Honorable Prime Minister moved the head office of the ministry to Chaguanas. And that is why we put a farmers market on the compound of the ministry. And we've kept expanding farmers market, Promenade, San Fernando, Rio Claro, Santa Cruz, Arima. We've expanded them because we understand that if we deal with land tenure and the farmers are producing more, if they could sell directly to the consumers, they benefit from a higher price, but we benefit from healthier produce that is more affordable, and if we consume it and we consume it right, we'd reduce the burden on the health sector. It's not rocket science, and you don't need to bring back the sugar industry to do that. The fourth area, I've already said, COVID taught us something very important, very, very important, that while I will always say in dealing with the food import bill, we must have an element of imported food on our plates. This country cannot sensibly be self-sufficient in rice. This country will not be self-sufficient in flour. We would not produce enough oil, cooking oil. But we, by making the appropriate healthy choices, would rely less on imported food if we adjust what is on our plate. And we learned that in COVID because we recognize the need to take control and not be overly dependent and provide for ourselves that we can eat something if there are disruptions in global and even local food supply. And a lot of people got interested in planting something. And we launched a program, which is the fifth element. And it's simply called Plant Something. And the Prime Minister said to me one day, and my colleagues in cabinet heard, he said, all them seed you have in Shagaramas, why you don't give it away? And we've done that. And we said we're going to put seeds in the hands of 50,000 households in the country. And our opponents, they didn't laugh at that one, you know. They were the first asking me very quietly when the seeds will be ready. And what we produced was not just seeds. I went up to the first people up in Arima, and we handed out the first set of seeds, a nice package accompanied by 6 booklets, 6 seed types: baigan, okra, corn, pigeon peas, pumpkin, and bodi. And a nice brochure accompanying, not only talking about the plant itself and how to plant and all of that, but part of it, how to eat, how to cook, and what it does for your body. Because as I say, it's not just eating because you're hungry, but eating to feed yourself and sustain yourself in a healthy way. And what those seeds has done and what COVID has done, COVID has brought back this home gardening thing. And I say to you, as I've said all over, having gone in every backyard in this constituency, day and night, I've been through this constituency, everybody knows that. Chaguanas East is the home gardening constituency in this country. Prime Minister, they planted everything, including the cannabis. I was surprised, and I'll tell you this. Prime Minister, you were a former Minister of Housing, and since then, you're advocating for home gardening on these HTC developments. You're advocating for that. In some cases, you reserve space for planting. In some cases, your policy determined the lot size should accommodate some level of farming. Well, I tell you, Oasis Greens, more than 50% of the households up there have substantial home gardens, substantial. And for those who follow my Facebook page, millions of you, you've seen as I've walked, I've shared people business with all of you. You've seen how well they're doing. And in Oasis Greens, I invite you to go there. And I want to tell my opponents one time, I go in Oasis Greens Saturday, And you could come and watch the gardens, but the home gardening. So the 5 areas I would say in agriculture: land tenure, stabilizing production and encouraging production, dealing with farm to table by giving the farmers outlets across the country that is rent-free and trouble-free, and giving them access to the consumers. In doing that, giving consumers the opportunity to purchase fresh, quality produce, produced locally by people they know and farmers they trust. And fifthly, almost by accident, getting the home gardening going again, largely on what COVID has taught us. As a government, we've tackled the legislative agenda. And it is the Prime Minister. It was the Prime Minister who tackled 28 years ago. He commissioned work on new fisheries legislation. We were down in Moruga last week, where we commissioned the construction of the new fishing port in Moruga. Through the dint of hard work and effort by UDCOT and others, we were able to salvage that project in Carenage for a new fisheries facility. Prime Minister was able to commission that. And we were able to make investment to improve many of the fisheries facilities across the country over the last 5 years. But the most important thing we will do for fisheries in this country is to modernize the legislative arrangements, because we do not operate our fisheries sector in a vacuum. We must comply with an international framework for the way in which fisheries must function. And we learned it the hard way, because our opponents failed to cooperate with the European Union, failed to meet with the EU when they were doing an evaluation of the fisheries compliance in Trinidad and Tobago. And one of the first fisheries issues I had to face as minister was a yellow card which we received from the EU in relation to the management, but most importantly, the legislation of fisheries in this country. And we don't export significantly to the EU. But the United States followed suit and set in place legislative and policy arrangements comparable to the European Union's, and gave us 5 years to comply with the requirements. And very simply, I'll tell you this: more than 40 million US in fish products leave these shores to go into the US market. And what that required was to accelerate the work on the new fisheries legislation, which the Prime Minister had started when he was Minister of Agriculture, Land and Marine Resources. And I'll tell you this, it was not easy work. And it was work that was attempted by several ministers. But I'm happy to say that the Prime Minister himself laid the 268-page bill in Parliament just before Parliament was prorogued. Just before. And when we return after August 10th, we will resume that work. We'll pick it up at the Parliament, and we'll give this country the modern legislative arrangements which we need for our local sector to survive and prosper. But we also need, if Trinidad must continue to take its place amongst the international nations in the trading of seafood products. Animal welfare. I had the privilege of laying a bill to replace or to do work on a 60-year-old piece of legislation. And if you don't know the importance of it, I'll tell you 2 things about it. First, on the non-commercial side, we've not had anything that seriously addresses how we treat animals, especially domestic animals. And every time there is some act of cruelty in relation to domestic animals, we see the videos on social media and we hear the cry. And the fine for cruelty to animals was just $200 and $400. So that bill is the first piece of legislative work that addresses the issue of animal welfare, including welfare of commercial and domestic animals. But just as important on the commercial side, we've seen our local poultry industry. And when I talk about eating local and eating chicken that is produced here, it is not simple talk, you know. Our local poultry industry is self-sufficient. Trinidad produces all its needs in relation to chicken. We're doing that also in relation to table eggs. We're doing that in relation to duck. But it's something we have to protect in the way every other country protects its local industries. And over a period of time, chicken is not simple. There are 12,000 jobs in that industry. There are contract farmers throughout rural Trinidad and Tobago. The most contract farmers in chicken in the country come from the constituency of Mayaro, mainly the Bish area. And when you go on a poultry farm, you find out that if women in this country are involved in business, well, the poultry industry is where a lot of women are involved in the rural communities. And the 12,000 jobs created by the chicken processors in this country, many of those jobs are held by women. Many of those women, single mothers, and many of those single mothers on the east-west corridor in this country. So them who launch, when my opponents launch something to grab the corridor politically, I never hear them talk about the simple bird, the bird. But that corridor and those rural women across the country need local chicken in order to survive. It's that simple. But you will never know if out of 18 elected MPs, 17 of them don't even live in their constituencies on the other side. 17 of them. If they don't live there, and if they don't go nowhere in Trinidad, if they go nowhere, and if when they go they ride in high on music trucks, they wouldn't know. They wouldn't know how this simple fowl powers families across the country. So when I told the country, if I had to eat outside, because everybody know I don't eat out so, if I have to eat outside, I will take my KFC and Royal Castle, because they buy locally produced chicken. They buy it every day. And when they do that, they support all those women I just described to you. And you will never believe that unless you go on the farms as I have gone as minister. It is not a simple matter. And that legislation, because that United States, the United States, from where the cheap chicken come, when they said to us that they have, when I said that I don't know how long that chicken slaughter, and that chicken could be there in their freezers in the United States for years, they said that that chicken was slaughtered 90 days before shipment. And I tell you, after months and months and months and months of meeting with all different people, I as minister am yet to see evidence of a date of slaughter of the poultry that comes in from the United States cheap. And that is a battle we will fight by the legislation. That is a battle we'll fight by the legislation. And Prime Minister, I thank you. The last piece of legislation passed by this government in the 11th Parliament was the animal welfare legislation that will protect local poultry. And just before that, we finally addressed this issue of import permits. Because even before that, if you wanted an import permit, we produce our local seeds. But we do not produce everything that is required, so we import seeds. Our farmers require seeds. And our farmers require a system of permitting that is efficient. And to cut a long story short, We've moved it for years, having to wait on an import permit, to an online system launched on June 11, that is paperless, June 11, 2020, that is paperless, that delivers a permit in a day. And at the same time, for more than 2 decades, after our friends who trade with us internationally told us that you have signed on to international agreements, which means that you should not require import permits for things like dal and chana and red bean, that if you have cucumber that is sealed in a bottle, you should not require an import permit for that. We eventually passed the legislation in June or July to give the minister the power, advised by the technocrats in the ministry, to determine, based on international agreements and standards, those things that will not, agricultural produce, that will not require an import permit. And you know what? That will reduce the requirement for import permit to the very basic of seeds, seedlings. Very basic. We have to have permits for seeds, but the system is now much faster. And the last area of legislation deals with wildlife. And I said in the debate, because we increased the fines. When I came in and I said that I support hunting, a lot of people felt that it meant that we'll have hunting year-round and you shoot everything and you eat everything. And they have a way. I saw it recently again, and I said it in the Senate. They have a way that they style me as this person who eating wild meat year-round, in season, out of season, drinking rum in Rio Claro. That's how they liked it, always with that story. And I told the Senate, if I eat wild meat once a year, that is plenty. And I don't drink rum. But I made it very clear, because of my love and support for hunting, and you know I don't support hunting because I like wild meat, I told the country, I grew up there. I grew up there. And I saw how many families earned a living during the hunting season and no other time. And if it is not wild meat, it will be marijuana. It is simple as that. And I could tell you, during a hunting season, a family could earn as much as $50,000, and they will live off of that for the rest of the year. And I supported hunting, not because it's something that will keep man occupied, and they'll be away from home many weekends, and the family and everybody will get a rest from them. But because I said very plainly, it is an important part of the economy in rural Trinidad. It is a very important part of the economy. But if you sit in Philippines and you're up in a townhouse in the West, you wouldn't know. You would not know. But I know, because I lived amongst hunters and I come from there. So we moved the fines for illegal hunting. We moved it from the 200 and we ended just before the 11th Parliament finished. We put it up to $100,000. Because we want hunting, but we want responsible hunting, and we want responsible attitudes towards wildlife and conservation in the country. And I'm proud to say that we've tackled wildlife and conservation in a way that no government has done it before, and I'm happy for that. On the issue of policy, in relation to policy, our finest teak, a 70-year investment, was being cut and shipped to India and other places. That investment that was made so that we'll always have forestry job and forestry activity in rural communities. Because you don't see teak growing in Tong. You don't see teak in Point Lisas. You see it in those communities that would not only live on chicken, but will live on wood also. And a simple policy measure was to ban the export of teak from Trinidad and Tobago. To ban it. Needless to say, those who were benefiting from it, a small amount, oppose it in the most violent way. And they threaten to go to court. And I don't know how they ain't reached there yet. But I'll tell you, in trying to get around it, a most senior officer in the forestry division is on suspension right now. Because you know what? As minister, I made it very clear I will work with every public servant. I'm not asking you a political affiliation or nothing about you. Do your work. But when the opportunity arose for me to bring improper conduct to the attention of the Prime Minister, because that is my boss, I have not been reluctant to do that. And it involved permanent secretaries, Commissioner of State Land, Deputy Conservator of Forests, and the list comes right down. I have not been afraid to do my job. So when you go around Trinidad and they tell you they don't like me, ask them if it's because of the ban on the export of teak, if it was on the quarrying that is now regulated. Ask them what it is I do that hurt their pocket so hard because they want to live free and nice in this country while the rest of us suffer. So forestry, a simple thing as honey. Our opponents went so far as to draft the legislation to allow honey into Trinidad without preparing our local industry for it. These are the same people. In one line in a finance bill, they removed 60 years of history that protected local cocoa and coffee. One line, without even the decency to discuss it with the cocoa industry. Without even the decency. And they now talk about cocoa this and cocoa that and doing this for cocoa. Well, what they did for cocoa was to virtually kill cocoa. But honey, if you don't leave your house, you wouldn't know. Trinidad and Tobago produces the finest honey in the world. Honey is not a simple thing. It's a very complex piece of chemistry. When you taste honey, you taste cocoa, you taste flowers, you taste fruit, you taste raisin in your honey. This is something that Trinidad and Tobago should be proud about. And I don't want honey produced in labs in China coming through Grenada and landed on my shelf. I don't want sugar water. One of the biggest retailers in this country was called to account for having sugar water on its shelf styled as honey. And it is the beekeepers who sent the sample to Germany for testing. And I see not only Venezuelan honey, I see other honey coming into the country, coming through legal channels. But I stood up with the support of the Prime Minister. I stood up in defense of our local honey industry because let me tell you something. Anytime we flood the market with cheap lab honey, my people in Rio Claro, Gypsies people in Marak, people up in Matlot, the Prime Minister, people in Diego Martin will suffer. Honey is an important part of the economy in agriculture. And where is the honey produced? Largely in rural communities by husband and wife and family. When you say young people not in agriculture, I could show you plenty young beekeepers producing the best honey in this country. Policy in relation to food safety. We were the first government that took food safety seriously. We had a joint select committee deal with the issue of food fraud. We took the report on food fraud out to a public discussion led by Kariri. And on the basis of work supported by PAHO, we were able to produce food safety policy and a food safety manual for the public health inspectors in this country. Because it is not just to produce the food. The vendors have to sell it in a way that is acceptable and is healthy. And that has been, for me, one one of the most important things we've done so far, but it is work that is not finished. And after August 10th, we will take it to the level where it starts bringing change on the roadside and the food courts and all the places in this country where food is sold. And the next 5 years will be about land still. But there's a very important element of that land that will unfold in our next 5 years. Very early, we'll deal with the issue of the young people who want access to land, because as I said, I don't want us to be issuing new leases unless we have dealt with those who have been long suffering. But for young persons, we propose not just land, not just agricultural land, but we propose homesteads. We propose that young farmers, those who meet the criteria for farming, would be able to have a lease of a parcel of land that can support them in agriculture, but will also include a residential plot. And that way we'll be able to do much more than give young farmers a lease of agricultural land. We will stabilize a family and we'll set and train generations of farming on the basis of that simple policy decision. We will continue with PPP, up in a repo, a lot of talk about it. And very quietly and without much fanfare, we took a 1,400-acre parcel of land out of the state's hand and into the private sector hand, upon which we will see an $80 million investment in agriculture. That will double the production of local milk. That will make breeding stock available to the farmers. That would put meat that is able to compete with imported meat. Because as the market conditions have changed, there's a livestock farmer here who has benefited from that PPP decision. As the international market conditions changed, especially during COVID, we saw the price of imported beef, for example, match the price of local imported beef. And we believe that if we encourage investment, we support it through PPP, and we create the right enabling environment for livestock and poultry through PPP arrangements, we'd be able to lower the cost of production and allow our farmers to compete on what is imported. If you read our manifesto, you'll see a significant amount about technology, something we learned the hard way in COVID, the infusion of more technology in agriculture and more innovation. And the last thing I'll say, one of the most important things and one of the things I'm proudest about as Minister of Agriculture, the thing that links agriculture to health happened during COVID. For a long time I have said that our food card system is creating more pain than gain, because that food card gives access to unhealthy imported products. And during COVID, what we were able to do was to introduce a new benefit to the most vulnerable persons in this country. And that is a $200 food card with a $500 veggie box. And the veggie box is 90 pounds of produce bought off qualified farms that has quality certification from NAMDEVCO, and placed in the hands. You see, the most vulnerable in this country must eat the healthiest food. And we as a government and we as taxpayers have the opportunity to dictate what they eat by not just giving them a card, but handing them the food. And the food, 90 pounds, does not include the 2 locally produced chicken, because protein is important on the plate, particularly for the youngest amongst us. The introduction of the veggie box by NAMDEVCO is perhaps one of the most dignifying things that I have seen as a Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries in this country. And I say to you that a lot of what we plan to do for agriculture will be driven by NAMDEVCO. Because if it is one institution that demonstrated during COVID that it could stand up to pressure and crisis, It is NAMDEVCO that took us through COVID, the board and the leadership of NAMDEVCO. And that 500 million is not to replace. You see, they talk about 700 million, and every time they talk about agriculture getting 700 million, I always add up the rest that is in other places, and I say it's 1.2 billion. And last week they were talking about the 1.2 billion being replaced by the 500 million. I say to you, the 500 million is in addition to whatever is allocated in the budget. And the 500 million is meant to drive the PPPs, to drive innovation, to support the young farmers in the country. It is meant to drive NAMDEVCO so that we could complete those packing houses and have it operated by the private sector. It is to place ready-to-cook packages in the hands of the school feeding contractors. It is to put ready-to-cook packages in the hands of the hospitals and the defense force. You see, if anybody must buy from farmers in this country, the state must do it first. I want to thank you. I don't have to tell Chaguanas East what you've asked me to do for you. I've met you, and you have given me all your thoughts and ideas. And unlike anybody who is opposed to me in this constituency, I've given you a document that tells you, this is what you've asked me to do, and this is what I'll do for you. And I want to say this. The very first thing and the most important thing in this constituency, I'm happy to say, I'm the first candidate in any election anywhere in the world that has run in Chaguanas issue on the issue of land tenure. Because he who feels it, know it. And the people of Chaguanas East have said to me, like the farmers across the country, do what you did for us, what you are doing for the farmers, and give us the land that we live on. And that is the one promise I make. And the other 5 are the ones they've asked me to make to them. Chaguanas East, what time is it? Time to win. Thank you very much, Trinidad and Tobago.
It's Clarence, we voting. Monroe Road to Lange Park, Montrose to Lions Park, going up here to Homeland. It's Clarence, we voting.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is always necessary for us as a nation to be reminded of the work and functions of our ministers. We've heard from Minister Rohan Sinanan in his data-driven and without a doubt stellar presentation. Similarly, we have heard from Minister Clarence Rambarat about his performance in his ministry. You will agree with me, you could hear his passion for nation. Let's give Chaguanas East, your candidate, a round of applause. The opposition who is presenting themselves as an alternative government to Trinidad and Tobago is just not ready. They lack political skills. They lack genuine compassion for this nation. They lack leadership. From 2010 to 2015, when they had a chance to stay, it was you and I and all taxpayers who had to pay. So call for the doctor, we at the PNM say. We need a leader who, amidst COVID-19, promised us that tomorrow will be better. And I quote our Prime Minister, notwithstanding what the virus is doing to us in terms of our fear and trepidation in dealing with it, the other side of that coin is that it has forced us to examine ourselves, and it may be even forcing us to transform to the place where we always wanted to be. Even in the darkest hour, our next speaker promised and continues to look at the glass half full. This election, Trinidad and Tobago, is about choosing a government that will rebuild, that will restore, and that will renew our country. This election is more than anything about leadership. It is about electing and selecting a leader who can truly build a new society. Brothers and sisters, our viewing and listening public, a tried and tested leader, a man who on August 10th will enter enter his 9th parliamentary term as the Member of Parliament for Digo Martin West, and who on August 10th will lead his Red Army to victory as he resumes the leadership of our beautiful island. I welcome to this platform the Prime Minister and the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley.
Anytime that you have to pay, or when people pass and they see you, oh my Lord, used to feel that shame. Wondering if this lasts forever, wondering when you will feel proud. If it's one thing that he didn't tell me, there is sunrise after each cloud. I say, even though it's long, no matter what come and go, we gon' make it. Oh Lord, I gon' make it. Even though it's long, no matter.
Chaguanas East. Pnm Chaguanas East. I'm counting you in the red column in 2020. The PNM has given you one of the most experienced and dedicated and well-prepared ministers in Trinidad and Tobago, Clarence Rambarat. And equally energetic and ready for the job and ready to deliver the seat, his campaign manager, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Mrs. Paula Gopi-School. That is the team that will deliver Chaguanas East into the column of the government of Trinidad and Tobago on August 11th. When you vote on August 10th, this team will ensure that Chaguanas East comes in from the cold, comes in from the wilderness, comes in with leadership, and joins the table where the decisions are made. Tonight, I'm sure those of you present here and those of you listening at home and abroad would have been surprised at the quality and the quantity and the nature of the discourse of the Minister of Agriculture telling you about the government's policies, actions, and programs in the area of agriculture. You don't normally hear that quality of presentation on a platform in Central Trinidad. Because in Central Trinidad, the politics is just talk the PNM. Talk the PNM. Talk race, tell lie, and try and get in there in a safe seat. Chaguanas East is not a safe seat. Because in 2020, the residents, all of them in Chaguanas East, will vote wisely and will vote for what is the best choice available to them. I've brought with me here tonight, I don't normally come on here with a lot of paper, but I come with a lot of paper tonight because I'll just touch on one or two going on, because I ceded my time tonight so that the minister could have spoken to the people of Chaguanas East and the country at length on this very important matter of agriculture, which this government is diving deep into. If we had more time, we can tell you a whole lot more about what's happening in agriculture, but we'll have more time after August 10th. This document, 80 pages, is our manifesto, because in today's papers, published today, prepared in recent weeks. This is the manifesto, the commitment of the PNM. This is our work program going forward. Much of what we said we'll do in the last manifesto either has been done or we're working on it, is underway. And of course, this is our program going forward. I just want to spend a minute mentioning to you, I won't go into the details. I'm mentioning to you that in this 80-page manifesto, published today in Trinidad and Tobago, 1 week from the general election of 2020, there are 10 pages in here on the future Trinidad and Tobago. And those 10 pages are on the digital economy and the digitization of governance in Trinidad and Tobago. And I would ask you to read it, because we took a lot of time to write it, to commit to it, because we are practicing it. We have already begun to digitize this country. And we are going to go full speed to complete digitization, which means that when you go into this manifesto, you will see us committing, it talks about, and it's on page 29, we start on page 29, recovery and the way forward for the next 5 years, creating a digital society. And we talk here about the easy internet access, fast connectivity, and enabling digital environment, optimal data storage, and thus the foundation to the creation of a fully digital Trinidad and Tobago. Our young people know exactly what this means. And all of you, I'm sure every one of you in this room has a cell phone, at least one. And I'm sure every one of you have a smart TV, either by you or by your neighbor. And I'm sure all of you know that the government runs on data collection of data on the citizenry. We're talking about linking all of that into one operation through one center called MyGov. And what that will do is to create speed and efficiency in doing everything. You heard the minister talk a while ago about months to get seeds. I know that. I tried to buy some seeds a couple of years ago from South America. The process to get the permit to get these seeds, and you have to accept it will take time. Now we're talking about doing it in one day. In one day. In one day. So, if we digitize the country, the 24 hours that is still the length of a day, we can get so much more done. So much more productivity. So much more accountability, because the record, everything you do will be recorded in where it's supposed to be recorded. And everybody who is supposed to be involved in it will be involved in it. You don't even have to leave this room to go into that room, or to leave this building to go into that building, or this town to go into that town. And of course, each of us will have what we call an e-identity, a unique number, which is you in that system. So you go to housing to apply for a house, you go to the hospital as a patient, you go on the port to pay a bill for customs and so on. Everywhere you go, you can do it digitally, and you could be wherever you are and connect into it. No more lines to go and pay bills. No more files to be found and to be lost. No more do it tomorrow, what can be done today. I'm talking about transforming the country's operations. Do you see that? Can you envisage that? That is where we're going. And that is where this document or manifesto spends 10 pages giving you the high points. And we've done, the cabinet is already paperless. The Attorney General's office with all your records. Registrar General, mountains of records, floors of files, tons of paper, digitized. We pick 5 ministries that will go next until we do all of them. That is what you can expect. And we've been driven to this by COVID. Never let a crisis go to waste. We were doing it bit by bit. Now we're doing it whole hog. That's what's happening now in Trinidad and Tobago. Right? So, I want tonight, in exposing to you a minister, a candidate of highest quality, Clarence Rambarat, who will be responsible in the cabinet for driving an area of government that he's eminently familiar with and has been driving. I want to identify to you some of our young people. Because you see, I am always making this call, and I'm making it again tonight. In this country, where we have boundless faith in our destiny, I call on young people to come forward and take responsibility for this country. Young people. Because when I talk about that digital economy and that digital country to come, it is the young people I'm talking to, because they are going to be the ones to take us there. Because they have been trained and prepared and eager to go. Young people in Trinidad and Tobago, come forward and take responsibility for this country in this digital age. So, Mr. Riyad Ali is our candidate in Caroni East. Caroni East. We have tonight with us our candidate for Chaguanas West, Raquel Bisoun. And somewhere there, I think we should have Ms. Sharon Archie from Chaguanas, from Caroni East, yes. We are all Caroni East, I'm mixing it up. And of course, the next member of Parliament for Princess Town, Sharon Babylon. And let me say a word about that, because I'll just touch on a few things tonight. You remember when we won the election the other day, and the town crier was defeated? She ran to the court and told the court that there are 5 seats that rain fell on, and those seats were won by the Pnm. Disregard the rain that fell in Barataria and Caroni and Chaguanas East, where they won them by 500 or 800 votes. Those are okay. But the seats that the Pnm won, they went to court to get the court to overturn those decisions and to declare the seats null and void. What they argued in the court was that the EBC, our EBC in Trinidad and Tobago, facilitated voting by allowing people to vote beyond 6 o'clock, because the excessively heavy rain caused the EBC to allow people to vote a little later. I think they extended the voting by whatever. And you know the first time I heard about that? It was a UNC Facebook post that had told me that EBC had extended the voting because the whole of Diego Martin West, we shut down by 6 o'clock. Because I saw the UNC telling their people that EBC give us extra time and they're going to vote for another half an hour what the time will be. But they went to court and argued that. The court agreed that the EBC acted improperly by going beyond the bounds of the law, because the UNC argued in the court that the law is the law, and the law is the law, and the letter of the law is the letter of the law. They must close 6 o'clock, and they went out, they extended the time. The court agreed with them and chided the EBC. But the court looked at the effect of that and said, the EBC, the time that was extended, couldn't have changed the seat, because the amount of votes cast could not have changed the outcome. But the law was determined that the EBC had acted improperly because they had not followed the letter of the law. I want to hear what they're going to tell the court now, where the law says if you don't file the proper form, your nomination is invalid. That word invalid is there in the law. So they use the wrong form, because there's a form for if you're out of the country, and there's a form for if you're in the country. They use the form for out of the country when he was out of the country. When he come in the country, they use the form for out of the country. Now, I'm telling you what the defense is going to be. Telling you no. The man was in quarantine. Where the quarantine was? In the country. Right? And of course, the reason why they have different operations, why the form is there, is because if one form could have done it, the law wouldn't have created 2 forms. So I don't know what they're going to tell the court. the Member of Parliament for Princestown, Karen Kabila. Because the courthouse is there for all of us. And of course, you know, it used to be that Lady Justice was blind. You ever seen the symbol of justice with a bandana over her eye? Justice is blind, so you're not supposed to see who you're talking to determine what answer to give. You know, it reached the stage in Trinidad now where lawyers writing the judge and telling the judge, it's that decision you have to make there. Don't make it before the election. I want to ask the Law Association if that is proper. I want to ask the Law Association in Trinidad and Tobago, who always know when to jump in the brew and when to keep silent. Is it proper for lawyers, senior counsel or junior counsel or whatever it is, to be writing a judge and telling the judge that you don't give a judgment before because the outcome of the judgment could have an effect on the election? That's what they have done. That's what they have done. But for the last 5 years, they've been up and down the country attacking Pnm members of parliament who they believe had problems. They spent 3 years on Marlene. I never said one day as leader of the Pnm that Marlene should be left alone because local election coming up, a general election, or she going to lose her seat. I never said a word. I left it to the judiciary and the police. They're on Faris every day. They're on Faris. So where they think their people have questions to answer, their favorite contractors who are before the court, but the court has to make a ruling that might have a political effect, them write the judge and tell the judge, hold your hand. But where they think Faris or Stuart Young or anybody or Marlene could be affected is free sheet. Could you imagine that? And that is where they want to take you in this country. Because this is the era where politicians believe that they could say anything, do anything. One of the things they tell you, don't talk about the last government. Don't talk about the last government. So if I don't talk about the last government, who should I talk about? Where public interest and public problem is about to be repeated. I heard the word tonight mentioned by helicopter. Right? And the point was made that helicopters are very expensive to own, to operate, and to use. And millions of dollars were used, billions or hundreds of millions used in creating pram with a helicopter. Tonight I want to tell the people of Trinidad and Tobago, I have been Prime Minister of this country for almost 5 years. I have never used a government helicopter for transport in Trinidad and Tobago. Never. I've used the transport that is available to me as Prime Minister, vehicular transport, boat transport, or the ferry, or the Tobago air bridge. Never sat in a government helicopter in Trinidad and Tobago as Prime Minister. But there are two helicopter stories I want to tell you. There was one about a Sikorsky helicopter that came to Trinidad and Tobago, came here like a sick man, was never used because it was unusable. Last week or week before, I as Prime Minister catching my nenen to pay bills here. I had to sign off on a settlement of millions of dollars to pay for that helicopter that was never used in this country. And if I had time to tell you about the circumstances under which it was bought and brought here, another story. Another one out there, bought again under strange circumstances, never came home here. We had to pay millions of dollars in legal trouble out there. How much? $35 million we have to pay for a helicopter that never came here to be put to use. And they tell you, don't talk about the last government. How in God's name I can't talk about the last government if it is to tell you that is what they were doing with your money? $35 million. And listen, We had to negotiate to get it down to the 35 million, you know. The claim that we didn't have a leg to stand on was $100 million, you know. You all understand what I'm telling you? And these same people are the ones who telling the judge, don't make no ruling, because the ruling might be such that the population might know what they shouldn't know, so hold your hand, judge. This is a matter where we're going to court. Contractor sue the government for $1.2 billion with certificates to prove it. We defending you, the taxpayers, saying no, those bills are to be contested in the court. And we counter sue. That is what they're going to tell the judge. Don't tell the population what is the outcome of the counter suit, you know. But like them judges, they're not listening. They didn't get the memo. Because one of them ruled today. One of the claimants who was claiming $17 million from taxpayers, the judge threw it out today. $17 million was the claim. If the judge had ruled differently, you would have to pay that. But justice doesn't look to see who in front there. Justice is blind. Should be. I take umbrage at elements of the UNC, friends and associates of the UNC going to the court and telling the judge to hold your hand in giving judgment in this country. Understand? I take umbrage at that because I know that is not exactly what we expect. If the judge is finished with the matter, tell the country. And if you're so innocent, you should have no fear of the outcome, because we believe that our judiciary would rule with a banner, a blinder in front of the eye. Ladies and gentlemen, this manifesto, I told you, has the digital age. What it does not have is a reopening of Caroni Sugar Factory. What it does not have is a restart up of the refinery in Pointe-à-Pitre to lose billions of dollars a year. What it does not have is a budget speech. Because, you know, we have this interesting development. The Tonkraya have a plan. And in the plan, in the right hand is the plan, and in the left hand is the budget speech, which she has already written. But that budget speech that she wrote, the financing of it is predicated on mobilizing unit trust money and NIB money. And that's supposed to be a big vote getter, a big winner. So she wrote the budget already because they win the election already. After all that you've been telling them and all that we've been telling you, they don't win the election already, so they wrote the budget, and the budget is to spend UTC money and to spend NIB money, National Insurance Board and Unit Trust. Well, today I came across a quotation from the famous writer George Orwell. And I want to quote it for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. George Orwell says, "A people that elect corrupt politicians, impostors, thieves, and traitors are not victims, but accomplices." I want to repeat that. A people that elect corrupt politicians, impostors, thieves, and traitors are not victims, but accomplices. You have heard enough and you know enough in Trinidad and Tobago to take a stand, take a side, as to whether you are a victim or you're going to be an accomplice. We'll leave that there for the moment. The news requires my attention tonight because I want to tell you that you are being taken for fools. You picked up the papers yesterday, and a headline in the Express that lasted a few hours because they moved it after a while. And then when the minister complained, they put it back. Because the headline was giving life to a UNC lie that ministers in my government were enriching themselves. Ladies and gentlemen of Trinidad and Tobago, the one thing that I went out of my way to make sure is that nobody around me in the cabinet practice corruption, not in the light form or the full-bodied form. Nobody around me. You ask anybody who work with me. So when the leader of the opposition, who is a senior counsel, former prime minister, come and tell you, with their accomplices in the Express, that when somebody recuses him or herself in the cabinet, it's because they recuse themselves from cabinet. Cabinet meets at least once a week in the normal scheme of things. We meet every Thursday. I heard the leader of the opposition saying yesterday that Stuart Young, by answer to a question from the Freedom of Information, recused himself at the cabinet 54 times from the cabinet. That means he can go to cabinet 54 times. That is 20% of the number of the cabinet meetings that Stuart Young missed because he's in conflict. And when you recuse yourself, it means that you're in some conflict where you're making money or the government or whatever. Why would a senior counsel tell you that? Well, let me explain to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the simple people who may not know how a recusal is done in the cabinet. If you are a cabinet member, cabinet notes come around the table to be dealt with for decision making. If there is any decision there to be made where you are likely to be a beneficiary, or your family or any close person you are associated with would benefit from the decision, it doesn't mean that decision will not be made. It requires that you let that be known to the cabinet. That's the first thing you have to do. Indicate that I have a conflict here. Is my wife, is my son-in-law, is my brother-in-law, is my child. You identify that to your colleagues in the cabinet. To not do so is illegal. And having identified this as a conflict, you then recuse yourself, meaning you take no part in the discussion or the decision. So the rest of the cabinet will handle that matter. You can't handle it because you are involved in some connection to somebody, your business partner, your wife, or so and so. So when somebody recuses him or herself, how does that become an illegal act to be on the front page of the newspaper, counting the number of times you recuse yourself, and therefore you are corrupt? Well, I can tell you something. The UNC write and talk that stupidness, hand it to the Express and the Express publish it. That's a matter for the Express and the Young family. So we leave that there. But when the leader of the opposition trying to tell you about ministers leaving cabinet or not being in cabinet because a matter on which they are recused came up and therefore they leave the cabinet. What nonsense. On a normal cabinet day, we may do 100 and something notes. There are 22 ministries. If each one brings 4 or 5 notes, that's straight over 100 notes. So if one of those notes or 2 involve you somehow by some connection, it is only when that note comes before the cabinet at that time you say that you have this conflict, you recuse yourself, you withdraw. It might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes for that to be done, and you're in cabinet. But so the recusal is part of the operation of the cabinet. It is not that you leave the cabinet. And the dotishness doesn't stop there, you know. A former UNC minister is now putting on social media that when the Attorney General withdraws from a discussion because he recused himself, the cabinet is not properly constituted because the Constitution says that the cabinet must involve the Prime Minister and the Attorney General. So if the Attorney General recuses himself, the President is supposed to appoint a temporary Attorney General for him, and then you could continue, otherwise the decisions are not valid. That is the level of dotishness that is spoken by the opposition. So if note number 9 is the Attorney General withdraw, we're supposed to find the President to tell her he gone to the toilet, right? Or he has to withdraw because his son-in-law or his daughter-in-law, and they will appoint another minister to act. And then after that note has gone, the President will have to reappoint, he resumes, and then 20 notes later, another note comes up that he has to recuse from. You have to call the President again and say, reappoint him again, because that is the UNC concept of making a fool out of you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, with their accomplices in the Express. I could tell you, under this government, in our 5-year period, we dealt with 9,200 notes. 9,200 cabinet notes we dealt with. On 54 of those occasions, a minister had to recuse himself because mainly he has a brother who is working in a bank. And he took the position that every time that bank name is mentioned in a cabinet note, he will recuse himself. Whether the bank is successful, as long as the bank is mentioned in the note, in participating in the bidding process, he will recuse himself. That happens 54 times. That bank ended up with 3% of the business that the Ministry of Finance does. And the Attorney General, he's a man who, he and his family are very involved in real estate. So a lot of the business in real estate in Port of Spain, it is quite possible that it happened on more than one occasion. That the note will come to cabinet when they're renting something somewhere in Port of Spain, and the Attorney General will announce, that is my cousin or my wife's family, so I withdraw, I recuse. So between both of those ministers, 94 times out of the 9,000 notes, they have had to withdraw from taking part in the discussion and taking part in the decision. The Express and Kamla Prasad Bisesa see that as corruption. Let me go and explain that to the court. But let me tell you something. It's not because they don't know. Many, many other ministers would have had to. And not yesterday or the day before, you know. A simple matter. I remember, I have 2 daughters. I was in the Manning cabinet. I have 2 daughters. And in 2004, one of them won a scholarship. I was in the cabinet when the Minister of Education brings the list of the students of that year who are scholarship winners. My daughter is on the list. It's the Ministry of Education bringing it. But because my daughter is on the list, I make it known to my colleagues, and I withdraw from the decision to accept the list. A simple matter like that. 2006, the same thing. My other daughter won a scholarship, same thing. In 2019, the Minister of Culture, her daughter won a scholarship. She does the same thing. So recusals are nothing new. But I want to ask the UNC. They had 14,000 notes during their period because they had ministries like Mare. Let's just look at the list. Let me show you something. Let me show you the physical list. You see these 2 lists? It's that whole page of list there. That was UNC ministers. You see this half page? That is Pnm ministers. We were running this country with half page of ministers. They had a whole page. That's why we had 9,000 notes. They had 14,000 notes. And the one thing that was not happening there was this recusal that they're making an issue of now. And you know why they didn't have to recuse? They were in the cabinet making deal, striking deal, giving contractors. The Eden Garden matter that the police working on now is a minister bring it to the cabinet to get an extra $120 million to pay for land. $120 million more than the land was valued for. The cabinet is involved in that. You show me the equivalent in this government. And I will tell you the same way I told you I've never flown on a helicopter abusing the government transport in this country. I could tell you too. No contractor in Trinidad or Tobago could tell you truthfully that he or any of his friends ever came to my residence to discuss any award of any contract. Because under this government, it don't go so damn thing done when Kamla Prasad Bisesa left the office. I'll tell you something else too. There isn't an issue that these contractors are getting government jobs. Now, if the contractors in Trinidad and Tobago don't get government jobs to do the contracting work that the Minister of Works mentioned a while ago and so on, who you want to give it to? Foreign contractors? Is that what you're saying? Let me tell you what the story is, and we said so from day one, and you heard us saying it from day one. When we were in the opposition, watching the corrupt practice of the UNC, we told all and sundry, hear ye, hear ye. What we will do in Trinidad as a Pnm government, where contracting is concerned, we will have open, transparent tendering processes. If you tender for a job and you win it, you get it. You don't get it by making deals in the Prime Minister's house. I have no bagman. In this government, there was no bagman, no bagoman. So all contractors knew that they were free to tender, and if you win it, you get it. And immediately, the cost went down, because also they knew, and they will tell you, that they didn't have to pay any premium for any minister. That didn't have to be taken into the price of the contract. You pay him only what the contract cost. And that is why QF Interchange is built for $219 million and not $444 million. But we also told them, hear ye, hear ye. If under the UNC, you are left any fingerprint or any footprint or any palm print of any corrupt action that you did under them, will pursue you to the end of the earth. So it's obvious. In one hand, they're free to tender and win contracts fairly and squarely under the Pnm government. And on the other hand, they have to answer in the court for anything that they did wrong. That is what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. So this stupid talk about contractors who will be in front of the court getting government contract. The cabinet doesn't give contracts. The Prime Minister doesn't give contractors contracts. Whatever contract they got between September 2015 and now, they would have tendered for it, they would have won it, and they would be doing it based on the terms of that tendering and award process. That's what it is. And if at the same time they have other difficulties, that is for them and law enforcement. We've brought back order and decency and process to Trinidad and Tobago. And we've done so within the confines of our oath of office, where before I became Prime Minister and before Clarence Rambrat became Minister of Agriculture, he had to swear not to be bad to anybody. You have to swear as you are entering as a new government, as a new officer. You swear to do right, to be fair to all persons, and to act without malice or ill will. So we could not come in there with malice about previous contracts. We could not deny anybody opportunity out of ill will. We could not do otherwise than what the oath called for. But in this country, apparently in this country, to follow your oath of office is to be identified as being corrupt. So all of a sudden, them don't know what corrupt is, and they don't know what honesty is. That's what they're asking you to do. So when you recuse yourself in the cabinet, you make the front page in the papers now. You understand? But that's a story that we're going to come back to at another time. We're going to come back because that dotishness that you see there doesn't stand on its own. It has legs. Right? That rabbit going to run. Because that is what has been happening in Trinidad and Tobago. We've put an end to that. We've run this country with a cabinet of 22 people. I just showed you the page list. We've reduced the cost. We've brought down the cost of construction. I'll tell you something else too. We've taken some people to court, having identified them as acting improperly, and create massive problem for the country. You know, when Kamla Prasad Bisesa and Anand Ramlogan lock up half of them black people in Port of Spain, because apparently your skin color and your social standing was sufficient to get you arrested on the Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Pick them up by the thousand. Jail didn't make the right fig. Carry them and show them in the market, like, you know. When the people got their matters discontinued by the Director of Public Prosecution, many of them sued the state. We are now in office. The Attorney General, Faris Alwari, is now acting for the state against all these people who making claims for compensation. The Attorney General wrote to two people asking them to just put in an affidavit to tell the court what was the reason for the state of emergency. You would think that a prime minister who declared a state of emergency and an attorney general who was the legal advisor to the cabinet who did it, seeing the country facing that situation of their own doing, the current attorney general now cleaning up your mess, ask you for an affidavit. You know, Kamla Prasad Bisesa and Anand Ramlogan refused to put in an affidavit in defense of their action, as a result of which the matters cannot be defended. So as fast as they come up in the court, the state lose the case, and whoever it is collect a few $100,000 and go with it. That's what it is. That's what it is. So now, we in this government sue some people for a substantial amount of money and misconduct at the port. Those people got character witnesses to defend themselves. Character witnesses. You know what the character witnesses? One is a minister, and the other one is a union leader. Them going to court. As is their right, can't stop it. But that's those character witnesses to go to the assistance of people who have been identified as having questions to answer for abuse of the public trust. It's 1 week to go. I tired talking about this. Seriously. Because you see, you all, I don't know where your taxes go. My taxes go to pay for medicine in the hospital. So you all could keep paying taxes to support that kind of thing that you all have been accustomed to. And I will keep paying taxes to buy the medication for the old people who are on dialysis and the nurses who stay up all night, making sure that they stay alive. That's where my taxes going. So if you want your taxes and you want your unit trust money and your NIB savings to go in fund, F-U-N-D, for the UNC to have fun, F-U-N, to award contracts to contractors at 3 and 4 times the price. Understand? And when they get it 3 or 4 times the price, one thing with money, as I told you all, money either is somewhere, it come from somewhere, or it going somewhere. And when they do that, and police looking for you, and you run from the country and go outside, and then you come back home, and when you're in, you're out, and when you're out, you're in, that is cricket. And you don't get nominated properly on nomination day, we of the PNM will follow the settled law and appoint and anoint and select and elect a new member of parliament for Princeton, Sharon Babylon. You see, it's getting late, so I won't keep you very long tonight, because we are on the verge of you deciding whether the PNM will continue to bring you the sane and sober government that we have been bringing you. You will decide if on the 11th of August you want a government in office that may very well be dealing with a wave of COVID activity that we have not seen, that we are not exempt from, that we are not invincible here in this country, and that we are not in a position to say it can't happen to us. And if you want on the 11th of August to have a prime minister from a party that does this, you see this? This is called UNC USA supporters. You see two flags there? American flags. These are people who are literally domiciled in America. They live in America, but they are Trinidad and Tobago connections with a passport probably. They have a certain group of people, if I call their names, including one of whom is running against me in Diego Martin West there, a little, what do you call it? And one who wanted to stay in the Prime Minister office as senior legal advisor to the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who is chairman of the National Security Council. Wanted that job because she couldn't feed her family, but wanted to stay in that office and become legal advisor to people who the police were after for terrorist activities. Understand? Them in a WhatsApp chat group here, linking up with these people in America, organizing them to come and tell you, to ball and cry on television, how they're suffering and how they're this and they're that, organized by the UNC, you know. And put a name and a phone number to people to call them. Look at here. And you know who's their leader? Pamela Prasad Bisesa. To force you to open the border. So if you want this border opened on the 11th of August, so that everybody could flood into this country, and you get the full blast of an uncontrolled infection rate of COVID in Trinidad and Tobago, you go and vote for the UNC on the 10th. You'll get that. And telling their friend and their family here, let me read it for you. Right? Telling their friends and their family to call Denise and Gary, one in Florida, one in New Jersey, right? And telling them, friend and family, to, as U.S. nationals, you hear it? As U.S. nationals, we humbly ask all our friends and families to go out and vote UNC. Not Trinidad and Tobago nationals in New York, you know. They see themselves as U.S. nationals. They put up 2 American flags next to the UNC setting sun. Identify themselves as U.S. nationals. But telling you in Trinidad to expose your grandmother, your grandfather, your children, your neighbor to COVID by voting for the UNC. You have been warned. You make that decision. You know, the other day a friend of mine was outside when this border closed down. Of course, you know, Trinidad and Tobago, he partner is prime minister, so you want to come home, call me. I hear his problem. His problem is that he don't have no passport. I said, what your story is? Well, you know, I have an American passport, but my Trinidad passport expired. I said, stay there. You would never allow your American passport to expire, though. But your Trinidad passport expired. But you want to come home. Home, man. They said dog foot break, you find him as a yard. Right? You want to, if you were so much of a Trinidadian, how come you let passport expire? No, you want to travel in emergency. You have an American passport, but your Trinidad passport expire. Them here, so is US nationals telling you. I mean, it's our people. And while I'm at it, good night to my family in Boston who following this meeting and those of you in California. Because since we tuned in here, they've been following live, telling me to put on my phone. Right? My family all over America. Right? Which is why I told you that we have a lot of people out there. But for this political party to be doing that, what is the next thing? Let me ask them a little quiz here. What is the next thing the UNC will do to annoy Trinidad and Tobago? Anybody have any idea? But all of it, this week can be a rough week, eh? This week, between now and Monday, all kind of things are happening in Trinidad and Tobago because they all them believe that the solution is election day. Who running from police? Election day, they could become minister and they could kill off the investigation. Who writing judge, telling judge, hold your hand until election. Who want to come home? You want to bet after the 10th of August, all this carrying on done? Right? And for those of you in the Trinidad and Tobago, many of you belong to some kind of religion. You're Christians, you're Hindus, you're Muslims, and there's some common threads in those religions. One of them is, I know it good from the Christian side because I'm not a church boy, but I was a head boy in a school carrying service in school, right? In the book of Matthew, you know, there's a part there where God is talking to the people. And he said, Jesus, he says, you know, I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was naked, you didn't clothe me. I was thirsty, you didn't give me water. You know? And he separated them into sheep and goats. The sheep are the ones who did that. One of them asked him, well, how come, you know, where were you? I didn't have a chance to give you water or to give you food. And he said, inasmuch as you have done it to the least of my brothers, you've done it unto me. So don't play no Christian in this country. Don't play no Muslim follower of Allah. Don't play no Hindu, big devotee, and then come and tell me here now that we don't have a shred of evidence against a single Venezuelan who is in this country, but telling me that our COVID problem is a Venezuelan problem. It is this government that decided how to treat with Venezuelans in a humane manner. And, you know, turning around and trying to make it so that those people who are here from Venezuela are going to be persecuted. This government will not encourage that. But we said from day one, when we took action to register those Venezuelans, we gave an appropriate time, I think it was 2 weeks, to come and get registered. And we said, if you are here and you are registered, you have the protection of the people of this country. If you choose not to be registered, it is because you don't want to be known by the authorities here, and therefore we will send you back home if we find you. And if you come in after the registration period, you are here illegally, and we catch up with you, we're going to send you back. Even to pick you up on the water or pick you up on the land. And that is the policy of treating with Venezuelan migrants. We have sent back, last week I think it was, 260 of them. Whenever we pick them up around the country, we hold them in Chagaramas until we get a boatload and we send them back home. But those who are authorized to be here, just remember what your good books tell you. Insofar as you've done it unto the least, you've done it unto me. Meaning not me, Prime Minister, but to the person you worship. We try as far as we are able to keep our borders patrolled. We have a circular border all around Tobago, all around Trinidad. There are 300 and something landing spots. You will hear all kinds of stories about people coming through the port and people and the border wide open in the south. We are doing so much work and patrolling in the south, but people are still trying to come through. Let me say that. Because you see, while we're fighting that, they're looking for people in that business to put in parliament, you know. People who are actively penetrating our border, bringing in people who come in for the flesh trade. It's parliament they want to go, you know. You understand? But the parliament is not a place for that. Parliament is a place for the likes of Clarence Rambarat and Sharon Babulal and Riyad Ali. That's what Parliament is for. So tonight, I just want to tell you, I have confidence in you, my people in Trinidad and Tobago. We don't expect to get all the votes, but we need the majority, and we need the majority of seats. So at this time, we have one more week to go. This is the last week. I understand there are a lot of people out there whose mind is not yet made up. You're running out of time because you'll have to make up your mind. You'll have to choose between us and them, and we are not the same. The Pnm gives you a choice, and the Pnm is the best choice of the offering that's available. Our candidates represent our country. Our commitment is legendary. So tonight, I can tell you again, because nobody's challenging me on that when I say it, not one of these candidates has made a deal with me for anything. And all they can commit to as you elect them to the Pnm and to service in the parliament is hard work and service. That's all they can commit to. Not one of them is there as a Pnm candidate because he or she could tell me, if I'm not selected, I could compromise you with my conversation with the police. Not one of them. And that is enough to make you sensible, right-thinking, responsible people vote into office on Monday a Pnm government to continue to defend you, to protect you, and to grow your interests in an economy that is buffeted by international market difficulties, by a pandemic that is threatening to overcome the world, and by corrupt people who want to put their hand in the treasury again. So tonight, I am saying to you here in Chaguanas East, this might be your best chance to get your best minister into office in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. And wherever you are voting in this country on Monday, there is a PNM candidate. And for those of you who are voting in areas that is not traditionally won by the PNM, understand that we in this country and we in this party, we see you too as a winner from the day you hold that PNM standard up, that Balize up, because you're all in this together. You're part of a team. And I hear them talking about surprises. Well, the only surprise that could happen in Trinidad and Tobago is that the people of this country would have ignored the exhortation of George Orwell. And before I leave, I must read it for you again, because some of you, it takes some repetition. A people that elect corrupt politicians, imposters, thieves and traitors are not victims, but accomplices. Choose you this day what you will be. So tonight, I'm so happy to be in Chaguanas West. So I've had the opportunity, Chaguanas East, with Chaguanas West, and with Caroni Central, and Caroni East. Here in Central Trinidad, take a stand for good governance. Take a stand for good behavior. Take a stand for confidence in our future, and vote PNM. And when you would have done that on the night of August 10th, we will hear the results coming in from all over the country, from the north, from the east, from the west, from the south, and you here in the center, you will join us in this chorus. Great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.
All will be fine. Look, we made the right choice every time. Still a job to be done and a race to be won, and we know we will win every time. Just keep the faith, heads up high. We're together in this, you and I. Yes, the job will be done and the race will be won, and we know we will win every time. And we go vote for the love of we country. We go vote to protect the treasury. We go vote, it's only Dr. Rowley, the right choice for TNT. PNM is the voice, PNM all the way on election day is the right choice at the right time. Put your hands in the air for the Balize. Hey, introduce my friend, the champion. I, Sasha, we voting PNM. Anyway, right choice, proud leader, the battle for your nation, your life matter, yeah. Leadership, yo, we promise you forever, yo. Vote PNM and everything will be much better, yeah. Strength and honor in 5 years of government. Never again will we allow mismanagement. PNM is here to stay. Love is permanent. Loyal to the flag and never about the establishment. Who them try to trick and sell out, but them can't buy my vote, me number one. They better move when Red Army are run out. All the seatful people will get one out. Political structure, send for the doctor again. Sign my name with a golden pen, a golden pen. Sign my name, yeah. Sign my name with a golden pen. We vote in PNM. Show me your voting finger. Everybody, show me your voting finger. All night, everybody say we vote in PNM. Come on, say PNM is a PNM power. PNM positive healing power. PNM moving closer together. PNM introducing Rishi, my brother.
All are we is one family. All are we is one family. Working together to build this country. When the world was breaking, everyone agreed. When the world was breaking, we happy it was he. And that is why we voting for Dr. Rowley.
Say super, say super, super. Ladies and gentlemen, super.
Red, sprinkle the water.
Red,
This is what we hear.
red.
Spirit is in Good night.
Trinidad and Tobago, as we leave here rejuvenated, knowing that with the PNM we have a brighter tomorrow, I remind you that on August 10th, there are 41 right choices to be made. Go out in your numbers and vote the PNM. Let us show them Trinidad and Tobago is PNM country. God bless. Good night.